All right, man, peace. So it made big news last week when Lavar Ball stated that he was going to take his son out of public high school, the public high school that his son currently attends at Chino Hills. The son in question being LaMelo Ball, who's on camera right here. Let's see what they have to say. Of course, I'm going to chime in.
Well, thank you kindly. Speaking of the Ball family, USA Today's Nancy Armour had some choice words for LaVar after he pulled his 16-year-old son LaMelo out of Chino Hills High School, ultimately because he's not a fan of the basketball coach. She wrote, "The Ball kids are talented, no question, and their father has made them a nationwide brand. But there's more to life than basketball, and there's more to them than basketball."
I wonder how she would know. He only has experience with them from birth all the way up to now. The experience that Nancy Armour has with the Ball sons is what she sees on television. But as normal with a super liberal female, she feels like she could tell a man what he should be doing and how he should be thinking.
Staying at his high school isn't going to diminish LaMelo's talent as a player. The same cannot be said for his development as a person.
Now, why is she saying that for? In the American school system, people are inundated with this jargon about how you need to go to school to develop social skills. It seems to me that the only thing that these children are developing is a lack of self-esteem and a terrible self-image by having to interact with other children who have the same self-image and self-esteem issues. People basically just go to school to learn how to live comparatively, to say, well, my clothes are better than yours, or when they get a certain age, the car I'm driving is nicer than yours, or I have a finer girlfriend than what you have. There's very little accentuation on actual learning.
Well, Kane, Damien Whitty's still here with us. Stephen A., I'll start with you on this one. Do you agree with Nancy Armour?
Absolutely not. Emphatically disagree with her. I respect her work. I respect the work that both her and Christine Brennan does.
Yeah, well, you have to say that because you have to kowtow to a couple of feminazi journalists. For those of you who don't know, this character of Nancy Armour, she has a history of making very super liberal, inflammatory observations for the sake of getting attention. She basically said that Tom Brady should publicly disavow Donald Trump because she was offended by Donald Trump. She said that that the Final Four should be moved out of Indiana or Indianapolis because of a religious law that was passed in Indiana. You know, she's another one of these broads who's just an agent of chaos with a typewriter, or pardon me, with a laptop.
This is just about this particular article. Let me emphasize that. The reason why I emphatically disagree with her is because of the examples that she used. She brought up Todd Marinovich and what he went through because of his father, Marv, and how fixated he was on his son. So he monitored everything about his son, brought in specialists, had him through a regimented training program, and, since birth, for crying out loud. Last time I checked, LaMelo was 16 years old. So he's been going to elementary, junior high school, and high school. And so because of this particular coach at this particular program, with his son having a year or two left in the high school level, he's decided to go this route. Now, you can disagree or agree with that all you want to. I actually kind of disagree with it. I don't think it's the wisest move to make. And I certainly am on the record saying that I don't like the way that LaVar Ball has called out the administration or the coach.
Well, of course, because you're a sheep. Look, I'm not here to tell people what to do with their children in regards to whether or not you put them in conventional school systems or education systems, or you decide to homeschool them. That's your business. What I will say is that, and this is something that I heard Shannon Sharp say, and I 100% agree. If you watch the ESPN Spelling Bee, almost every last one of those children that you see at the Spelling Bee are homeschooled. Most of your top national scholars are homeschooled. Okay? What most of these schools are just learning centers or reprogramming centers to promote humanism or socialism in the school system. And it's something that they started back in the 1800s under a man named Robert Owen. Robert Owen was the main inspiration behind the propaganda that's taught in the school system today. But, let me let him continue on.
But the title here is, it's official. Ball is the worst sports parent. Are you kidding me? The worst? Todd Marinovich had a drug problem. Any problem with Lonzo? Any problem with LaMelo? I'm not sure about that. I haven't heard anything like that. Your son's the number 2 player in the NBA draft, number 2 overall pick. Let's also take into account the.
Yeah, but they don't care about none of that stuff, Stephen A. LaVar Ball is he's a source of anger for the liberal woman because they can sense his energy. His energy is that he's not going to demean or diminish himself for them. He's not going to bow down to them to make them feel strong. This is why you've seen a lot of these super liberal females, Christine He Raped Me Leahy or Jamel Hill, come out against him. This is why. It's an energy that emanates from him. Also that big Sasquatch, Sarah Spain. They're always targeting him because, once again, when you are a so-called black man and you're not a conformist, they are going to try to take your head off. When it comes to the super liberals, once again, the black man is at the bottom of the totem pole. If he does not toe the line, they will attack him even worse than the so-called conservatives will.
The fact that no one has ever said anything about these kids in terms of the way that they conduct themselves, how professional they go about trying to do what it is that they want to do. He might be a bit obnoxious. It's not ideal. And I'm certainly not here to try to defend all the antics of LaVar Ball and the eccentric nature that he has displayed in.
Yeah, unlike you, right? Because we know you're not eccentric. We know you never go out of bounds, right, Stephen A? Okay.
And clearly he's about marketing himself and
as are you with your bombast.
And his kids and trying to maximize whatever it is that's out there. But in the end, to call him this, I believe is excessive. It's beyond the pale, and it was.
Well, you also don't have a lot of people would kill.
Not just that, it's plainly an ad hominem attack on both his manhood and his fatherhood. Okay, but as we know, manhood is open for attack at all times, particularly black manhood, so-called black manhood.
Kill to have a father.
So you also don't have the evidence yet. I mean, really, what we're saying is time will tell. You know why? It always does, and the jury's still out. Now, is it impossible for me to imagine a 30 for 30 one day and one of the Ball kids or a couple of them saying, "Oh, my father was overbearing"? That's not impossible for me to imagine.
Yeah, I could see that as well, particularly if their careers don't pan out. You'll normally see kids talk about how their fathers were overbearing if their career doesn't pan out. Floyd Mayweather, I remember on episodes of 24/7 where he would talk about how his father would beat him if he didn't execute a certain boxing move properly. But, I mean, look at him now. So there's only so much he can lambaste his father for how he was raised.
Right? I mean, it's not impossible. But so far, so good, actually, with the Ball kids from everything we know. And furthermore, it seems to me that LaVar's basic disposition is, let's see how this all shakes out. You raise your kids your way, I'll raise my kids my way, and let's see how it all shakes out.
I agree. Here's what we do know. We know that he has one son in the NBA, he has another son at UCLA, and he has a third son that's being homeschooled. And to be quite frank with you, the average person who goes through conventional education in America does not know shit. All right? Ask them a question. They do not know shit. Particularly the ones that have only gone to high school. It's amazing how woefully uninformed, misinformed, or disinformed people are here in America that have gone through the alleged school system, which, as I've stated, are just training grounds for socialism and humanism. That's all they are.
Out in the end. Furthermore, your values don't have to line up precisely with mine. We can disagree about real important values to us in fundamental ways and still respect another parent's right to raise their kids the way they see fit.
Yeah, as long as it's liberal. Right? We know that in regards to yourself, you will attack somebody if they have a disengagement from what you would view to be common sensibilities. And you always say the same thing. It's about right versus wrong. It's about good versus bad. That's the normal liberal attack on sensibilities that are disparate from theirs.
So on philosophically, I disagree, and I also don't think the evidence points to it.
I like both of your conclusions. I just don't like your arguments whatsoever. Let me tell you what I mean by that. The worst sports parents, by the way, are the ones that, first of all, in my ranking of worst sports parents, are the ones that never go about acknowledging their kids, who don't actually parent their kids. Your rebuttal could be, they're not actually sports dads, or they're not actually sports parents. They're just fathers. They just created this human being. That's the number one. And by the way, there are sports examples of that. left and right. That's the number one.
I mean, abandoning the children, essentially.
Not being a part of their life.
Right.
Yes.
In some cases,
Yes.
that's even worse. Not even acknowledging their existence or denying their existence. And it's not hard to come up with those examples. So that's number one on my list. Number two are those that actually steal from their kids. There's a unfortunate.
I agree with that.
Fortunately, I believe that Bernie Kosar, for an example, has had this situation where his dad helped manage his career and ended up actually stealing from the money he made in
Yes, I remember that.
his career. So that would be number two. But number three, now, Stephen A., this is where I disagree with you. Are these people that engineer their children to be professional athletes to a what's the word we're going to have to search for here? Detrimental? Dangerous way? You point out that Marv Marinovich engineered Todd by what he ate, the specialists he brought in to train them, the age he started. The truth is, it looks like Lavar is doing all the same things on that front. Maybe it will turn out differently. Maybe they won't have drug problems the way that Todd Marinovich has. But that's where I come to a problem with you. You don't reverse engineer it. You don't go, let's just see if this all works out.
But timing matters, because I brought it up that LaMelo's 16 years of age. In other words,
that would have kept you.
It doesn't compare to somebody like Marv Marinovich was doing from the time the kid.
Oh, look, man, I personally think that certain people are just predisposed to have the weakness of drug dependency. I don't believe that it's necessarily how you were raised. I just think that certain people are just predisposed to lean on chemical substance abuse. You have a guy like Todd Marinovich who was raised by a dad who, put him through all those rigors, and he leaned on drugs for succor or for support. And you have a guy like Doc Gooden, whose father was not really that involved in his baseball upbringing. His father did kind of guide him into baseball, but he was nowhere near as involved as Todd Marinovich. And, Doc Gooden can't stay away from the pipe, even to this day, allegedly.
He was born.
Well, you know,
See what I'm
when
saying?
did Lavar start with LaMelo?
Well, I'm
He
just
said
saying,
he married his mom so that he knew that he would produce professional athletes. Or his best chance.
Yeah, but LaMelo has been in high school. Lonzo has been in high school. In other words, they fraternized with kids. They've had a reasonable upbringing.
And also,
They weren't
I don't want
Yeah, this stuff is so ridiculous. A lot of these high schools are just gang recruitment centers, just dating services. People are more concerned with, who got the fattest ass and who they going to knock down next than they are actually learning anything, if they actually can learn anything, because most of the teachers are poor. Well, like I was saying before, the modern day public school system is based off of a framework that was really inspired by a man named Robert Owen. He was a leader of a socialist movement. It started over in Scotland. He was Welsh. He was a Welshman. He started over in Scotland. He came over here to America in the 1820s. And he opened up a school in Indiana to teach children. I mean, to give him this much credit, he did fight for the rights of children workers. But and he lowered the workday to 8 hours. But his true goal and his true aim was to promote atheism and socialism in schools. All right, he was what was known as an Enlightenment thinker. Okay. And he brought a lot of that over here to America in the early 1800s. Thomas Jefferson actually was trying to implement a public school system in the late 1700s, but the people didn't go for it because at that time, unless you had a very large city, the people really did not want to have to bring their children to schools. They normally taught them from home, and they normally used the Bible as a main textbook. All right. Back then, the children really just needed to know how to read and write to a degree. But they wanted them to understand a lot of the stories in the scriptures. And basically, they were normally put under an apprenticeship by their father. So whatever their father did is what the child was taught.
To misunderstand what I'm saying either. I'm not saying that the ends justify the means. What I'm saying is we're trying to extrapolate from what we understand of them publicly the way he's raising them at home. It is possible to bring in nutritionists and do all those kind of things for your kids and also have them know you love them, spend time with them, impart important values to them. Those two ideas are not mutually exclusive. So hold on one second, let me just finish the...
This chick Molly is so out of control. Like, they just let her chime in whenever. Nobody puts on this show to hear what Molly Karam thinks. Nobody. And this is why I respect the order of the Skip and Shannon show much more, because the chick, Joy Taylor, stays in her place until Skip allows her to speak. Then she normally makes cogent points at the very end. All right. They allow this chick Molly, and this shows you how intimidated Stephen A. is by the structure of ESPN, knowing that he works at a super liberal network. He wants to gain points with the bosses by allowing Molly Cameron to be reckless and speak willy-nilly. And it's one of the reasons why First Take is currently an inferior product to what you're getting from the Skip and Shannon show, Undisputed.
The thought, so that when I say, let's see how it all shakes out, I mean as a reflection of the overall way in which they were raised.
I agree with that. You really don't know and can't tell how detrimental LeVar Ball's tactics of raising his children are until down the line. From what we see right now is A++. That's the bottom line. And he has put his children through an apprenticeship, which, as I stated previous, that's what fathers did. You had a skill that you taught your sons. The main skill that LeVar Ball seems to be teaching his sons is the skill of the mindset of entrepreneurship and the mindset of being an alpha male. All right? Being a creative thinker. These are things that most children are not taught today because the parents just pretty much just throw them into the public school system and say, look, we'll let your teachers teach you. For all intents and purposes, these teachers are the new parents, as well as the children that they're going to school with, who normally tend to impose their sensibilities onto your child. This is why you'll notice that homeschool children tend to excel more. They concentrate more on what they're being taught.
That we can't simply assume that because he wants them to be professional ball players, he's leaving out other important stuff.
I think the other important detail to me I just wanted to quickly mention is LaMelo good with this? Is he on board with it? Because that's a huge factor in this as well.
Not that huge a factor. At the end of the day, he's 16. He's living under his father's roof. He must do what his father says, and he must follow what his father says is best. All right. Once again, we live in a society where we're told that the mindset of a 16-year-old should be equivalent to their parent. Well, if you want LaMelo to be the deciding factor in what he does, then he should be able to live on his own. That's the bottom line. If LeVar Ball's the one providing a roof over his head and food in his stomach, at the end of the day, LeVar Ball is the deciding factor in what happens to LaMelo Ball, because nobody cares about him and loves him as much as LeVar does. Certainly none of you at that table do. Or Nancy Armour.
You know, for me, I take great exception to what the message that's being brought across in this article. As a father, that I have two kids that are being homeschooled. I think that's a great thing.
So do I. I mean, if you can do it, great.
I think there's nothing wrong with spending much time and trying to mold your kids in the way that you want to do it. That's called parenting to me. If you have a kid that's the number 2 draft pick in the NBA draft, another one that's a freshman at UCLA, and then another one that has a commitment to UCLA, I think you're doing okay.
I agree. There's no way that you could be the worst sports parent. What she really means is the worst black male parent that's on television right now. That's her real problem.
I think you're doing all right there. People said the same thing about Earl Woods and Richard Williams,
Well, let's pump our brakes. I believe Earl Woods and Richard Williams are both MK handlers, but that's neither here nor there. I know that Earl Woods is a handler, military background, and the things that the way that Tiger Woods said that he was raised, having a golf club glued to his hand and things of that nature, appearing on Johnny Carson at I believe 3 years old. I have no doubt that Tiger Woods is a monarch athlete and Earl Woods was his handler. As a matter of fact, when he died, those of you who remember, they had that notorious commercial in black and white where Tiger Woods is just looking at the camera and he can hear the voice of his father reverberating in his head. What was that meant to denote? That was meant to denote that Earl Woods is his handler, or was his handler. It was very soon after that Tiger had his breakdown. All right. In regards to Richard Williams, look, man, I'm already on record as saying I believe both the Williams sisters are a couple of trannies. It is what it is. People can get mad.
The father, Tiger Woods and Venus and Serena Williams said they were overbearing, and I just, this whole thing just really bothers me to sit here and say that someone say LeVar Ball is the worst sports dad. As a black father, that to me, that has
there's a racial component.
I'm not saying.
Look at Max. Max is already shaking his head. Go ahead, Damien. Tell us how you feel. Go ahead. I'm liberal. I hear ya.
I'm not gonna sit here and say that the writer of the article is anything like that. I'm just saying
you're sensitive to it as a black father.
As a black father, there's always a perception out there, the narrative that black community don't have a lot of black, good black fathers out there, and for you to come out and say that LeVar Ball is the worst sports dad ever. What are we saying?
Listen,
We already know what we're saying. Anytime that a so-called black man shows any type of authority, any type of suzerainty over his family, he's going to be castigated. We already know that. All right? This is why I've been telling brothers since LeVar Ball popped up on the scene what the real skinny was. Because when he first popped up, a lot of so-called black men were against him. Why is that? Because a lot of so-called black men, quite frankly, think emotionally like women do. And they respond to somebody who has an authoritative mentality, and they take it as an offense. Like, who is this guy to think like this? And, I saw that very vividly when LeVar Ball first came on the scene. I only made a video about him in the first place because brothers kept asking me to talk about him. Because I already saw in the spirit what the general consensus was in regards to how people felt about LeVar Ball.
What are we saying?
And not only that,
He compared him to Marv Marin.
Oh, yeah, but I mean,
fair, but the empathy.
And let me say this, over time, the so-called black community has come to warm to LeVar because of, the verbal altercation that he had with He Raped Me Leahy. My thing is you should have saw that already. But it didn't surprise me because the so-called black father is not welcome in the average black household. Okay? He's not welcome there. So this is why I stated before that there was a method to his madness when he got with that white woman. Unfortunately. He had to do that.
The impetus behind it matters. The context behind it matters. What's your motivation for saying all of these things? Because you know what? Richard Williams did a lot of things with Serena and Venus, and people had questions, and look how they turned out. When John Elway didn't want to play for his particular team and his family was involved, when Eli Manning didn't want to go to the Giants, and didn't want to go to San Diego, and instead insisted and manipulated his move to the Giants, stuff like that happens. You don't.
Those are great examples.
Hear individuals outside of the black community being castigated because of decisions that they make as fathers very often.
No.
Very often. That's what I said.
The mistake you guys are making is reverse engineering it. You're saying if it turns out that the kid ends up a professional athlete, the parenting was good. I don't think Tiger Woods insinuated that Earl...
Nobody's saying that at all. As of right now, LeVar Ball's parenting is not up for referendum at all. Other than for people who are offended by the fact that he speaks the way that he speaks and that he's making decisions over his children. Once again, the children of America, seeing as everybody here is a debt slave, the children of America are viewed as the property of the state. Okay? So whenever anybody shows any form of authority and suzerainty over their children, especially if you're black, people get offended. If LeVar Ball was East Indian, and he was homeschooling his children, or Caucasian, or Asian, nobody would bat an eyelash because they would trust that he was making the right decision. For a so-called black man to say that he's going to homeschool his child, automatically they feel like he's incapable of teaching his child anything. What are they really saying? What are they implying by looking at you with such scrutiny for wanting to homeschool your child? They're saying you have nothing to teach him because you don't know anything because you have no culture. That's really what they're saying. And that's why they're so offended at his intention to homeschool his child. All right? Like I said, you guys can go look up a man named Robert Owen. He's the one who really started the socialist public school system, because that's what it is. You can also look up a guy named Horace Mann. Horace Mann is known as the father of the public school system. He also was an atheist, a socialist. The list goes on and on.
Earl Woods was a great father from start to finish. Aspects, yes. But Tiger Woods has said his first memory was Earl, gluing a club into his hand.
Let me ask you a question.
Hold on, real quick. This is,
I
by the way, for some reason, whatever reason, Stephen A., it's rampant in tennis. And it's not just a black-white thing. It's not just Richard Williams. It's Jennifer Capriati's dad.
Not for some reason. It's because
Andre
tennis players hit their
Agassi's dad.
peak.
Yeah, and beyond that, Earl Woods also trained his son in military tactics and military techniques. I believe that Tiger Woods used to take a lot of the same drugs that soldiers took before they went to battle, before he went into many of his tournaments. Tiger Woods was always keyed up. He was a guy who was literally born and bred to be a champion golfer. Earl Woods is, as I probably already stated, come from a military background, Green Beret. He was bringing Tiger Woods to the golf course literally from birth. By 3 years old, had him golfing, had him on the Johnny Carson show. This was all predictive programming. They'll oftentimes bring monarch children through certain venues just to show the people that this is what they're grooming. All right, this is why you have certain affluent entertainers today who came up through shows like Star Search. People like Usher and Christina Aguilera, Britney Spears, Justin Timberlake, Martin Lawrence. People who were raised under the programming. All right, for those of you who don't know, Martin Lawrence was born on an Army base. Okay, but anyway.
Very young. But you come up with these dads who do this, and the question is, do they turn out to be pro athletes?
See, you're talking, but you're not getting my point. I'm not challenging the facts of what you just said. I'm saying you don't hear about it like that. Let me say this again.
Andre Agassi's been talked about consistently.
You have no problem with the headline of this article. It's official.
She may not be the headline writer either, by the way.
Oh, yeah, that's true. She may not be the headline writer, but I mean, it's
right. But the sentiment of the headline is in her article. I mean, it really doesn't matter if she wrote the headline or not.
It's in our column too now. It's official. Ball is the worst sports.
Stephen A., hold your thought. We're going to take.
Right, but we already know what that's meant to be. That's a concerted attempt to levy an attack. They basically declared a code red on LaVar Ball, especially since since his interaction with Christine He He showed that he's out of control and that he's going to say whatever he wants, and he's not going to bow down to the female power structure on the liberal side.
To take a quick break and come right back to this. Mark.
Yeah, we need to come right back to this. All right, so now we're going to pick up where we left off in this roundtable discussion on LaVar Ball taking his son out of the socialist humanist public school system and deciding to homeschool his son.
This article right here, Stephen A., you were addressing the headline, "It's official, Ball is the worst sports parents ever."
And let me say this before they start. Once again, please understand, when you have a child in this society, as I've stated before, all people in this society under the 14th Amendment are basically debt slaves. You're basically the collateral to the debt that is owed to the international bankers through the Federal Reserve. Your children are seen as property of the state. This is why it's a major red flag, particularly if a so-called black family were to take their children out of public school and decide to homeschool them, because that means that your children are not being properly indoctrinated. The point of public school now is not to teach your children, it's to indoctrinate them. Meaning what? To normalize homosexuality, lesbianism, transgenderism. That's the point. Atheism. Things like Darwinism. Okay? This is what they want to make sure that your children are inundated with. This is why your children go to these schools and they come out bugged out. And if they're fit enough, then they can go to the Groves, that being the university college system, and attain their baccalaureate, meaning they can be declared wizards under the order instruction of Bacchus and his father, Cush. Okay? And then and the mother, Semiramis. That's basically all this society is about.
I'm trying to say that I'm quite sure that there are a number of incidences that have been chronicled. I mean, I'm a sports reporter for over 20 years. I get all that, 25 years. I get all of that. What I'm trying to say is piggybacking off of Damian Woody's point. No, it's not about race per se, and I'm certainly, like Damian, not accusing that of being her angle. I'm
not going to overtly accuse her of that being her angle, of her being an overt racist. But you have what's called racialism. And that's basically how people subconsciously think. Okay? That does have to be addressed. I'm not really
considering the way.
I'm not really concerned with trying to change how people think or what they say. I just think that it needs to be noted so that, brothers understand how to address these sentiments when they're brought to your attention. Okay? Because a lot of people are not, in their mind, they're not racist. They don't really believe that, but things resonate for them. If they get on an elevator, if a woman gets on an elevator with a black man, of course she might pull her purse closer than she would if she was on the elevator with an Asian man, right? Because imagery resonates. The mind thinks associatively. All right, that's just how our brains work. So when a female like Nancy Armour sees a LaVar Ball, she sees a big black man. She naturally thinks incompetence, particularly scholastically. Who are you to think that you can teach your child anything? That's why we have the school system for. You're not qualified. If he was East Indian or Asian, I'm sure that she would not bat an eyelash.
That black fathers are depicted in the eyes of the American public. To say something like that about this man is incredibly incendiary. And when we consider some of the things that have been chronicled about some of those fathers out there who deserve the criticism that they receive, to go this far with this man, I think it appears excessive.
My rebuttal.
Well, Stephen A., remember, you are the one who agreed with Sarah Spain when she made her incendiary statement. So are you disagreeing with Nancy Armour because she's wrong? Or are you disagreeing with her because she doesn't work at ESPN? That's the real question.
To that is this.
Because Sarah Spain said something very similar, if not even more incendiary. I did a video about that also.
Headline is wrong. I think her conclusion is wrong. I don't think he's the worst sports father ever, and I laid out those examples earlier that I think would easily surpass him. But I don't think that he also gets a pass, or that she should not acknowledge it if she believes that. If she believes it, I'll beat her on the merits because I've got better examples. But if she thinks that, she shouldn't neglect to say it because of sensitivity regarding black fathers. If she thinks, regardless of his skin color, that he is the worst father in sports, then she shouldn't sit there and go, well, I'm worried about who's going to say this is about race. If she thinks it is.
Well, I agree with that. She shouldn't bite her tongue if that's how she really feels. But then at the same time, she has to be prepared for the counter response, the volley back. It is what it is.
I think you're emphatically and completely wrong about that. I think she has an obligation to take the depiction of black fathers into consideration when you say something like that.
Not necessarily. It depends on what her whims are. Once again, on the liberal totem pole, she's higher than you, Stephen A. So no, she does not have to defer to your feelings. Now, you have to defer to hers because on that totem pole, particularly since you're a corporate whore, a corporate asset, you do have to acknowledge that she trumps you. Even if you're more famous than her, even if you make more money than her, she still trumps you on that totem pole, bro. You, as Skip would say, you know it and I know it.
Because, again, if you can challenge the merits on it, so can an abundance of other people. And as a result, that should be a dissuasive measure to prevent her from doing something like that.
At least a nod to that issue may address that sensitivity. Just acknowledging that there may be sensitivity about this, perhaps. I want to say something.
That's a good little comment by Max. She can elicit her statement, but she should also state that, she should also acknowledge that, there is a stereotype about black fathers that she's aware of, just to show that she's not totally going off the rails, per se.
Pursuit of greatness. I brought this example up the other day. I do it frequently when this topic of fathers comes up, or parents whose kids are potentially really special in some area. I think of the movie Searching for Bobby Fischer, which was about a chess prodigy named Josh Waitzkin. And he thought that his chess teacher thought maybe he could be, the next Bobby Fischer, the next great chess genius. And basically the film is about the parents at a certain point, the father thinking, okay, in order to do that, he cannot lead a normal life. Because it is not possible to become the best in the world. We see this as...
Absolutely. And I mentioned this already. It is not possible to become the best in the world at anything and live a conventional life. When you look at most... and really almost every person who has excelled in their field of endeavor, they grew up loners, they grew up outcast, and they grew up in what would be considered a recluse lifestyle. All right? You cannot blend excellence with regular. It just doesn't work because the regular will always try to pull the excellent down so that they can become as average as everybody else. That's why in the school system, at least they used to do it, they would take the smart kids and they would put them in one program, the average kids in another program, and the kids who are a bit slow in their own program. Because if you mix all three together, what will the slow kids and the average kids do? They will try to impede the progress of the kids that excel.
With tennis, because the prime is so young, and have a normal childhood. Can't do it. Not enough hours in the day. Does that mean they chose that he wouldn't be the next Bobby Fischer? He'd be a happy, well-adjusted kid. But does that mean if they chose no, he will be the next Bobby Fischer? That's the wrong choice? Is it not okay to sacrifice a normal childhood, or even in some cases life, in the pursuit of greatness? That's what the pursuit of happiness is about, your own private interest, the way you define it. And that includes a parent with a child. Muhammad Ali's health comes down to the same issue. All these dangers in boxing. He sacrificed his health, you could argue, on the altar of greatness, right?
Well, I would agree with that to a degree. I believe that he sacrificed his health because he started to worship himself as a boxing god. All right. Now, I've stated already that there is a sentiment, and a sentiment that I also adhere to, that his disease was accelerated due to being poisoned, most likely by some government agency. It wouldn't shock me at all. Allegedly, his camp in Deer Lake was poisoned, or the air vents were poisoned. I've heard things from his house was poisoned to his camp at Deer Lake was poisoned. I mean, it really doesn't matter either way. I have little doubt that, that there was some chicanery going on with Ali and his illness, but he was going to get ill anyway. He took so many flush shots from so many powerful punchers, but that's neither here nor there. I do believe that his overall downfall was what the ancient Greeks call hubris, his pride, and the fact that he really started to worship himself as a boxing god. He didn't take certain things into account. It really was his downfall, but that's neither here nor there.
Are we not allowed to do that in America? Is a parent not allowed to
You do it for yourself.
make that?
You do it for yourself.
But your children, the way you raise them, if you think your child is special in an area, even if it's tennis, they're not going to lead a normal life, but they have the chance to be the best in the world. And does that also mean that if they're not the best in the world, but you've taken that path, you've failed? I'm not reverse engineering it. I'm saying a parent and a child have the right to pursue greatness, even if it means sacrifice in areas that means they're not going to lead normal lives.
Max, listen, I agree with you 100%. Here's the funny thing is, we're in the era of everyone is complaining about participation trophies. Mm-hmm. Here's a guy that's training his kids. He's training his kids to be the antithesis of that.
Well, that's truly the problem. The so-called black man, once again, he's commandeering his children's life. People don't like that because, once again, they feel like he is incompetent. And I always go back to this theme. So-called black man, people feel like you're incompetent. Why? Because they see that you're constantly trying to blend in with them as opposed to do your own thing. Now, Lavar Ball has to suffer the backlash of the stereotype towards black men, but he doesn't care. That's what I like about him. He doesn't care. All right, he does his own thing. And, that's why I talk about the so-called school system. It really has been constructed to inundate the children with a lot of propaganda that's socialist/humanist. For those of you who don't know, humanism is basically another way of saying Enlightenment thinking, aka Luciferianism, the worship of mankind, the worship of himself, the belief that a man can explain everything, the origins for everything. All right, this is what is going on in the school system, and it started back in the 1800s. The guy named Robert Owen. You have another man named Horace Mann, who was considered the father of the American school system. I mean, this is a guy who came out and said, if I remember correctly, that God must be replaced. Is what Horace Mann said. And then you have a guy named John Dewey. I mentioned him in a previous video. He was not particularly known for teaching students, but he was known for teaching teachers. He came out of the University of Chicago, and he was teaching at Columbia University. He would teach prospective teachers and instructors, and he taught them a lot of socialist philosophies and humanist philosophies so that they would go out in their teaching and dispense those teachings to students. All right. He was also involved with teaching the Rockefeller grandsons. Okay, Nelson and David. And I'm trying to remember the other two guys' names. John D., he had one son, and then his son had four sons, but I can't remember all their names. I know Nelson and David.
And now you're getting an article about this guy being the worst sports father ever. I mean, how many kids out there would just kill to have someone to care about them as much as Lavar Ball cares about his own baby? Be so invested with the time, resources, and everything to try to harness the talent and make it and realize it to the point where your son is the number 2 pick in the NBA draft.
Well, that's why Skip Bayless says that he wishes that Lavar Ball was his dad. A lot of these people wish that Lavar Ball was their dad. To be quite frank with you can tell.
And so on and so forth. I just don't understand how you could just bash someone for just investing in their children.
You're absolutely right, and on that point we all agree he's not the worst sports father in America. But it also doesn't mean that somehow he's above criticism. And when I've been on this program, and I think many others look...
I don't think that anybody's above criticism, but I think that when your criticism is clearly couched in a personal agenda, I think that you cannot get frustrated when people call you out. I also think that you have to expect people to counter it when clearly LaVar Ball's tactics have led to success.
And pull his kids off of an AAU floor because he doesn't like the refereeing decisions, or quit various measures of sports and teaching his kids, if you don't like the rules, you can walk away. These are not good life lessons. These will have detrimental effects about your views towards authority and rules and who you are. Last point, back to you, Stephen A., on whether or not you should factor in the way you say something could be perceived. I'm really surprised to hear that from you. You know, and this is a disconnect often that we have on this program, the three of us, and that
I don't know how many times this guy's going to tell Stephen A. that he's surprised at something that Stephen A. has said or a certain sentiment that Stephen A. has put forth. Stephen A. has shown that he's going to say and do what he wants, as long as he's not offending anybody higher up on the totem pole.
With the public, I am not going to shy away from a truth. And I think Nancy Armour is wrong in what she thinks is true here, but I'm not going to shy away from a truth because I'm concerned about how it's going to play or how sensitive people will be about it. I'm going to give you the truth, and if I'm wrong, I'm wrong, I'm right, I'm right. And for the...
Well, you're going to give people your truth, all right? If you're giving people the truth, you're not going to be wrong. When you're giving people your truth, you could be wrong. All right? There's no such thing as being wrong if you're speaking the truth. But when you're speaking your truth, you can be incorrect.
Part, Stephen A., I think the same thing about you. You do that as well. So I'm surprised for you to say, no. She should filter this through the public sensitivity.
If you're surprised, it's because you don't pay attention enough.
Oh, come on. You don't sit there and go, how will this play?
No, excuse me. It's not about how it will play. It's about the sensitivity of a particular issue. How I speak about games and guys performing on a court of play or the field of play or whatever is entirely different than how I would speak about them as a parent.
Point taken, and a good point at that.
The fact of the matter is, I don't know. This woman, with all due respect, you're a white woman. You don't know about black fathers. Not to the degree that I do. I'm a father. He's a father. I think we would know something about it. I think that...
Well, she wouldn't know anything about fathers because she's not a man. So she's not really qualified to speak on the subject at all. If a man was to write an article saying that LeBron James's mother is the worst sports mom in history, everybody would tear him down.
We would have a heightened level of sensitivity as to how black fathers are portrayed. I'm not saying that she's completely ignorant, that she doesn't, I don't know who her friends are, or the inner circle. That's not what I mean by making that statement. I'm simply saying that you are not a black man. You are not a part of a black family.
But you're the one putting that on it. She's addressing fatherhood. You're the one adding black to it.
Yeah, because he is a black man who is a father, and we live in a society where black fathers are religiously denigrated.
And it seems that the standard...
Absolutely. And held to a different standard. There's no doubt about that.
Been lowered all of a sudden.
Both Damien and I were absolutely...
I don't believe that the standards for fatherhood for so-called black men has been lowered. I think that there is no standard at all. People do not know what to expect from the so-called black man because they don't know what the so-called black culture is. They really don't know what's expected of a so-called black man to even establish a standard.
Positively confirmed that on far too many occasions we see black fathers depicted in a way that we find offensive, that we think is erroneous and inaccurate, and not nearly, that doesn't even come close to being as factual as people believe.
Will, the fact that you believe,
we have to live with the fallout from
the fact that you don't. The fact that you know truth exists. It's not a black truth and a white truth.
Sometimes there.
No, sir. We know that there are multiple Americas, there are multiple realities. There is a reality for not just for people based on race, but for people based on their subculture, where they're brought up, how they're brought up, things of that nature. So there's even different black realities. There's a reality for so-called black people who were raised a certain way, and then there's other realities for so-called blacks who's raised in a gang culture, in a single mother culture, in a two-parent culture, in a father-dominated culture, so on and so forth.
Excuse me, hold on. Excuse me.
There's experience.
Hold on, I'm answering your question.
Yeah.
You really think that there are some things that are not a black truth? Because my truth is different than yours.
There is not your truth and my truth. There's only the truth.
Excuse me. My truth in terms of my upbringing, my culture, what I'm exposed to and what I have to deal with walking out in the streets every day is entirely different than Will Kane.
You just changed it.
See, once again, this is why this magical, mystical conversation that liberal blacks are looking for, this is why it will never bear any fruit, because this is what it descends to. How dare you offend me? And then the other person says, how dare you offend me? And then they just go back and forth on how much each has offended the other. Okay?
So in other words,
there's black experience, there's black perception, there's black life lessons, same as mine, and you can pour it through a racial prism if you want. But in the end, there's one truth. The truth doesn't get painted by your...
Excuse me.
Says human philosophy through the history of time.
Then throw that damn nonsense out the window.
If we can't agree on truth...
We can't agree on that, because I'm trying to tell you right now. Excuse me. I didn't say there's no universal truth. I said not all truths are universal. See how you tried to twist it?
I don't think you guys are having the argument you think you're having.
Go ahead.
I think what you're really saying here, Stephen A., actually can be reconciled with your position, Will, which is that the reason you think you could beat her in this argument, that he's not the worst sports parent, is because the standard for a black father here seems to be a lot higher. In other words, he has to do much less wrong to be called, without any evidence in yet, to be called the worst sports parent ever.
I can live with that.
Well, I would say that LeVar Ball or so-called black fathers in general are held to a standard where, once again, people don't even really know what to expect from them, because the expectation is that the so-called black man is a failure and a poor leader. And the reason for that, once again, is no culture. There's nothing. The people feel like there's nothing that the black man has to impart unto his children. All right, so now I also want to include this segment because John Sally has some very intelligent things to say about this topic.
LeVar Ball's decision to pull his 16-year-old high school son out of high school is genius. This, according to John Sally, former NBA star, champion in his own right. Look, people are talking about this like crazy. So we asked John Sally about this because people are tearing LeVar Ball a new one for this. They're really going after him. John Sally says this is brilliant, and here's why.
I wanted to ask you about LaMelo Ball being yanked out of high school.
Smartest move in the world.
Yeah, is it smart?
I think LeVar needs his own show.
Okay.
He's the smart.
He already got his own show, brother.
The smartest guy in the world. The smartest people in the world are homeschooled. Dalai Lama was homeschooled.
Absolutely. All the intelligent people, all the smartest people in the world are homeschooled. Why? Because they have a chance to focus on what they need to learn. Like I said, back in the day, people were taught out of the Bible, and everything else that they needed to learn, they learned from their father. They were put under an apprenticeship. This is why people were far better at their craft back then than they are today. The college system is set up to initiate you through the lower levels of the bacchanalian rites, and also just to accrue more debt onto your person. That's pretty much it.
Got a homeschool. Okay. Right? If not, you get shot in school. You got to get picked on. You got to worry about clothes. You're not focused. Sure.
Absolutely.
And he's developing a great athlete. Boris Becker, right? 16 years old in Wimbledon, right? 16 years old in Wimbledon. Nobody said jack. Yeah.
Well, we know why that is, John Sally. He had the complexion for the connection. We know that there's certain sports where it's okay for somebody to be 15 years old. Remember Jennifer Capriati? She was 14, 15 years old. She ended up being a burnout, so she might not be a great example. But, tennis, they allow it because, when you're Caucasian and a wonderkind, it's okay. Hockey, baseball, so on and so forth. But we know the reason for that.
Yeah, he brought up an interesting point. There are a lot of other professional athletes in a lot of other sports that drop out of high school, focus on their sport, and they become superstars.
Right.
Boris Becker's a perfect example.
There's entire sports where it's the sports culture for these guys to be starting at 14, 15, 16 years old and taking it seriously if they want to play at world-class levels. Typically, you don't have to do that in basketball, but with what LeVar seems to be going for his sons, maybe you do want to have a kid a little bit earlier.
He thinks there's more money to be made, a more successful career, and a better life if he focuses on training LaMelo to be a basketball player than trying to have him
to have him learn all the bullshit that he's going to get taught in high school that he's never going to utilize in real life. Okay, that's what it boils down to. And let me say this before I forget. I mentioned this guy, John Dewey. He's one of the main instructors of many of the teachers who promoted humanism and socialism in the school system. He taught the Rockefeller grandchildren. But also, let me say before I forget, he was the president. He's the founder of the American version of the Fabian Society. I mentioned the Fabian Society many videos ago. I can't remember which ones or which one. But the Fabian Society basically was involved with financing the Bolshevik movement under Lenin in Russia that toppled the Tsar. Okay, John Dewey was the president or the founder of the American version of the Fabian Society, and actually changed the name. I'm trying to remember what they changed the name into. I think it was intercollegiate socialist something. But anyway, I'm about to wrap this video up because I'm about done with this.